Hey everybody, it's Dan, and I just wanted to talk about the next movie in our exploration of 31 Days of Halloween this year, 2018. This is the 21st of October right now, but I'm recording the video for the 22nd of October. So this is day 22 of our Halloween month. Now, one thing that I wanted to talk about before I get into this film, which is, of course, the 1990 remake of Night of the Living Dead, is the nice little homage to Night of the Living Dead that was featured in the episode of The Walking Dead tonight. Personally, I thought that it was a very obvious one, but just in case anybody missed it who was watching, the scene where Maggie and the other gal end up going to that little shack that had the tin kind of flapping that was making the noise that was attracting the zombies, so that they could take that off of there and repair it. Yeah, there was that red truck that was sitting out there, and the occupants were both burned to a crisp, and they were right next to a gas pump that the handle had been yanked off of it and everything. Yeah, that was kind of supposed to be a little bit of an homage to the truck in Night of the Living Dead that gets set on fire when the idiot tries to shoot at the lock to get it unlocked so that they can actually get the handle off and use it. So I thought that was kind of just a clever little placement of the props and vehicle and everything, just to sort of pay respects to Night of the Living Dead. I thought that was good. So anyway, getting into this version of the film. Now, amazingly, they didn't really stray too far from the old one. I mean, there were different things, and they were important things, but overall they did not deviate too terribly from the original film. And I suppose that has to do with the fact that George Romero, the creator of the original film, was the writer for this one. The screenwriter, the guy who played Johnny in the original, was one of the producers, and special effects master Tom Savini, who did the special effects for a lot of the later installments in the Dead franchise that George Romero made. He was the director of this version of the film. So, yeah, they were able to do it very well, and it is a remake that really holds up very well. Now, one of the things that you might notice as you start to get into the film is that there's a few familiar faces for fans of horror. For example, Johnny in this one at the very beginning is played by oh, the name just escaped me, but anyway, he's the same guy who played Chop Top in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and he played Otis in the House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects films. Also, one of the guys who's in it is the guy who played the deputy in House of a Thousand Corpses, and also, well, he was killed in House of a Thousand Corpses, but he comes back, briefly in like sort of a dream sequence that the sheriff is having in Devil's Rejects, because he was the sheriff's brother. You see him in here too if you pay attention. Of course, this was years before those films were made, so they look very different. But you'd be able to pick them out if you're careful. But anyway, also most importantly, Tony Todd plays Ben in this version. Tony Todd, of course, was the villain in Candyman, and he also played the coroner in the Final Destination films. So he plays Ben, which I thought was a fantastic addition to this movie. And I really enjoyed it, like I said, because they didn't deviate too much, and the things that they did deviate on were actually really good changes. Um, Now, of course, it starts off the same way, except, like, for whatever reason, Johnny and Barbara are going to their mother's grave, not their father's grave, but really the grave that they're going to makes no difference, because it's really just, what happens when they get there. That's the big deal. Um, so, of course, they get there and, you know, end up getting attacked by a zombie eventually. There's actually a great, like, minor addition that they added. This old guy just kind of walks up to him and he's got like this gaping head wound that's bleeding, and he just kind of, like, looks at them and says, I'm sorry, after he bumps into them, which, like, just, it added to, like, a little bit of a creepiness factor. And when they're trying to figure out what's going on with him, they turn around and there's a zombie right there. Clearly one that must have attacked that guy, and he was trying to, take off from it, but he, hit himself in the head. Maybe he's a little bit nuts. Um, so they get to the house. Of course, there are people in the cellar, and they, kind of freak out when they come out, and there's that whole contention about whether or not they should, go, stay upstairs or go down into the cellar, or as Barbara, who is not nearly as useless in this one as she was in the original, says, the zombies are so slow. We could just walk right past them. So why don't we just get out of this house and go somewhere else, somewhere safer? Try to meet up with some other people. We'll have a, militia behind our backs, which is what she eventually does in the film. And she meets up with the sheriff's militia, from the original version, and just goes along with them and takes out zombies and whatnot. But meanwhile, of course, the fire happens. The guy and his girlfriend both die in the fire, and it turns out that, of course, the key that they needed to unlock the gas pump to be able to get the handle off and put it in the truck wasn't even on the key ring that they brought out there that they had found. So that was totally useless. And of course, things end up changing a little bit significantly when Cooper's daughter comes upstairs from the cellar, and she's all, reanimated zombie and everything, and he tries to protect her from Ben, who is planning on shooting her, and from Barbara and all that stuff. And well, actually, Barbara might not have been there by this point, but in any event, I don't quite remember, like, 100% offhand, which is kind of sad because I just finished watching the movie. But things happen. So anyway, eventually Cooper ends up running up into the attic and barricading himself in there, and Ben ends up going down into the cellar like he did in the original film, and barricading himself in there, and he finds the key for the gas pump. It even says, gas pump key on there, so he just kind of, like, grins and chuckles about that, and just the stupidity of it being down there of all places. But eventually morning comes, and Barbara is with the group of, the media and the sheriff's deputies and the other, just, like, rednecks and hillbillies who are going out shooting zombies for a good time. And she makes some comments about how the undead and the humans aren't very different because of this stuff. But honestly, the undead are just, like, mindless zombies who are bent on killing and eating people. So can you really blame people for shooting them and maybe even having a little bit of fun to kind of, like, relieve the stress of the morbidity of the situation? I don't know. I don't think that's too far of a stretch. So I think her comments on that were a little bit ludicrous and unnecessary. But anyway, so they get back to the house, and of course, Ben, who was down in the cellar, ends up, turns out that the zombies managed to make it down there. He got bitten, and, he turned into a zombie. And he comes up and, almost goes for Barbara, who ends up, taking him out, telling him she's sorry and everything. And as she's searching the house, she finds Cooper, who was up in the attic the whole time, and he's just like, oh, the attic turned out to be the safest place. And, she intentionally shoots him and kills him and just tells everybody else that he was a zombie. So I thought that was pretty clever. So overall, it was good, and honestly, I kind of feel like Romero wrote the script so that it could kind of be like, maybe a little bit more of the film that he wasn't able to make, 22 years previous. So, yeah, overall I think it was good. Now, if we're comparing the two, it's tough to say because the effects are far more phenomenal in this one. However, the original is a zombie film classic. I mean, it can't be beaten. And so it's really kind of a tie, but I think just because of the, and this is just my personal opinion, but because of how much the original film means to me and the fact that it frightened me so much as a child and then became one of my favorite films, I would really have to pick the original over this one. And I mean, also, the original, there's so many, callbacks to that in, modern films and whatnot today, and we're talking, it's 2018, so, yeah, so, 50 years later, and, people still call back to it, like tonight on The Walking Dead. So really, I'm going to have to give this one to the original, but special mention goes to the remake because it's really not bad, and it's a fantastic film, and I highly recommend that everybody check it out. Now, with that said, one thing that did kind of, I don't know if it made me feel better or worse about the remake, but in the original film, if you're listening carefully and paying attention as the television is on and things like that, they flat out say that, some kind of, spy satellite or something, just some sort of thing up, above the atmosphere ended up exploding and causing, something to end up in the atmosphere. And basically they hint that, yeah, that's the thing that started the rising of all of these dead people. So basically, like, you're in a roundabout way, because they don't draw too much attention to it. If you listen carefully, you can tell that that's what they're talking about. The original version of the film tells you flat out what caused the zombie apocalypse. So there's no mistake. There's no question. That's what did it. That's what they're hinting at, caused the whole thing. So you know that from that one on, all the way through at least Land of the Dead, so the first 4 Romero zombie films, that was the cause of all of that mayhem, and everything that happened throughout those films. Now, in this one, they don't actually mention anything, and personally, I'm undecided whether it's best to not know what caused it, because it really wasn't all that important to begin with, or whether it's best to know exactly what caused it, because, well, I mean, like I said, it really wasn't all that important to begin with. And a lot of, zombie films do try to, take things that, are going on, the zombie apocalypse and whatnot, and just not mention any cause to it whatsoever. They don't even bring it up. It just remains a mystery the whole time, and that it is, it's a pretty common trope in the zombie film genre, to just not have a cause for the zombie apocalypse. But I've kind of started to find that, because it happens in almost every single, zombie story, to be pretty annoying. And to have just the one film where they said the reason for the zombie apocalypse, that being the original Night of the Living Dead, I think that that's kind of, refreshing. So I'm really kind of, hard pressed to try to decide which one I think is best, whether I think that, not knowing is better, or whether I think that knowing is better. So why don't you guys go ahead and comment below, let me know what you think about that. Let me know if you've seen both of them, which one you think is the best and why. Your, questions, comments, concerns, all of that kind of thing, like, why you like this one compared to why you dislike this one, and whether you think that it's better to know the reason for the zombie apocalypse, or to not know the reason for the zombie apocalypse. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys. Tomorrow I am going to do yet another older film that has a more recent remake, and I think you guys will enjoy it. So yeah, have a good one.